It is 8:10 Newstalk Sauga 960 Raw. Mike Richards, David Bastl. We were talking a little hockey going into the break there. Big win for the Jets. The Leafs. The Leafs are looking the way the Leaf fans kind of hoped. But again, arms a little bit folded. You have to talk to me in March to see exactly what happens with this team, because that's the reputation when you don't get it done when it needs to happen for 5 years. But I have to say the trend looks pretty good. But here's an interesting thing I didn't know, that Todd Woodcroft and the Catamounts were the reason that the Danbury Thrashers played the way that they did.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So you can replace the Thrashers with the Catamounts. Is that true, Todd Woodcroft? This was your philosophy?
I can neither confirm nor deny these allegations. Mike.
Hey, great to have you on the show. This is look, for all sports, this is great, but as we just talked to James Richmond from the Steelheads, you got kids playing now full throttle, buildings for the most part. Are they now NCAA? I'm assuming any restrictions for those going to the game, or is it just kind of wide open?
No, it's been each rink has had a whack of fans. Our rink is basically sold out. There's a mask policy and concessions are at a minimum, but at least the fans are there, especially here at our rink. It's called Gutterson Fieldhouse. It's one of the most historic rinks in NCAA hockey, and it's been packed and great.
Well, the kids must be going just nuts, because they are kids. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, at this age, you're still kind of turning them into adults. This is that pivotal point, which is why sport to me means so much more than just the wins and losses. Now you're molding these people, and there's no better place to do it to me when you get a full ride at an American university. It's just, to me, it's just such a gift, because there's so many avenues that you can take. You're not necessarily fixated on being a professional, but a professional something, absolutely. And that's why these programs are so important.
Well, college athletics in the States, obviously I'm from Toronto, and it's different in youth sports, which is still a great avenue for young athletes, young girls, young men, young women, young men to come and play. In America, it's a obviously huge business. You're getting stadiums that are sold out 110,000 people for a football game. Like it's part of the fabric here, similar to hockey in Canada. NCAA sports is part of the American fabric, whether it's football or basketball or hockey or baseball or whatever it might be.
Well, let's talk about that, Todd. I kind of wondering how your blood pressure is, considering that you've been part of 1-goal games for the last 3 weeks. It seems a tie against New Hampshire this weekend and a 1-goal loss on the Friday. I know you have a big series coming up with Providence on Friday, but as a whole, you guys have been in every single game this year. You got to be happy with the progress the program is making right now.
I think for us, really, Dave, it boils down to like the prize of victory versus the process of improving. Like we're improving. Even the UNH game, we ended up winning that one in a shootout. A huge win against Boston College, which this team hasn't done in I don't know how many years. But we're playing all the young guys, and the veterans that we took out of the portal. There's a transfer portal in the NCAA. We were able to grab 5 players from the portal from different programs, storied programs like Cornell, RPI, Minnesota Gophers, like really good pieces to this team. And one of the best pieces we took was Phil Laganov, who's from Hamilton, lives in Burlington. He's the guy who scored that goal in the final game last year, where he toe dragged the guy on the penalty kill. It was I think it was voted the highlight of the year on ESPN. And guys like him are coming in, and they're bringing experience. Somebody like Phil specifically, like his positivity with our young guys is palpable. Like he's so positive, he could jumpstart your car just holding the battery terminals. And to come in and be able to have a voice around these young guys, knowing that his legacy isn't just the wins and losses, it's what he's leaving behind. And same with all the transfers that we've had to come in and have an imprint on here. Some of them are 1-year guys, some of them are going to be 2-year guys. But the reality is we're trying to play as many of the young guys as we can, the young players, so we understand next year when we're back in the October, November, December, these guys have experience.
Right.
Now, when it comes to recruiting in hockey in that part of the world, there's some pretty big schools that you would compete against. For instance, when you talk about Boston College, we got UMass, you got Northeastern, you got some schools where and Boston University, you've got a lot of places, and hockey, and especially high school hockey. And I don't know people even in this area. You're a Toronto guy, you're a Scarborough guy. We understand, well, at the time the MTHL, now the GTHL. We understand what that means, but I don't know if people really understand in certainly Massachusetts and New England how big high school hockey is. I mean, it quite frankly isn't what I'm used to growing up in this area. Like I think Robbie Ftorek or someone like had his uniform in the Boston Garden as a high school hockey player. The Gardens would never do that. We don't necessarily glorify the high school part. We're more juniors. So when you come to recruit, are these the difficulties you have? For instance, it's like Marshall having to recruit guys and losing out to West Virginia all the time, because West Virginia would be the bigger school, and so therefore recruiting becomes tougher. What's it like for you at Vermont? What is the challenge, and what schools, literally, what's the pecking order, sort of, so to speak?
Well, you're getting players now who are born in 2005, right? Like, these guys are watching Teletubbies, and like, they can't even watch an R-rated movie yet. So it's high school hockey, specifically in pockets, Massachusetts, where I lived last, in Minnesota. Like in Minnesota, the high school hockey tournament sells out the XL Energy Center every year. And for all the games, it's 18,000 fans to watch high school hockey. I think probably, Mike, the difference is we're all from Toronto, the MTHL, GTHL. Players had somewhere to go to play, and you didn't have to travel very far. So if I'm from Don Mills, I got to go play in Mississauga, or I got to go play in North York, or wherever it might be. If you're in a pocket in Boston, you're playing for your local high school. They don't have 6 or 7 other teams that are the exact same. So the high school hockey becomes, I guess, the penultimate league for these young men and young women to come and play from. So for us, from a recruiting standpoint, we got to identify which of those schools are the ones that we want to target. But the USHL, for example, is really the premier league. You're going to pull guys out of high school, but they have to be special. Like, we want them to develop in the USHL or the North American League, or we actually recruit a lot in Ontario. Quebec for us is so close. British Columbia, I was just out in British Columbia looking through the BC League. We had a bye week, so I was out there to watch some games. I did some stuff for Sweden for the Olympics. I got to see a couple NHL games too. But it's the game is so global now. You're getting players from all over the world, not just the best high school players anymore. You might find a player from Latvia, from Poland, from Sweden, from British Columbia, from Saskatchewan, Florida, like all these places that are non-traditional markets. You got guys playing in the NHL now that developed in Florida, that developed in Texas, California. Yeah. So it's not just Toronto. When we grew up, you could say 80% of the best players are coming from Toronto. Like, my era was seeing Shanahan, seeing Graves, seeing Marchment, Mike Ricci, like Lindros, those guys coming up through the MTHL, and they were always the best players. Now they're coming from all over the world.
Todd, you talk NHL, and you obviously still keep pretty good ties with a lot of your friends in the National Hockey League. You and I were talking this summer, and I want you to tell our listeners about the Paul Murray story. That's all I'm going to say, and I'm going to let you take the floor right here, because it's a pretty good one.
Just because they won last night, yeah, I think I remember the one you're talking about. I know the one you're talking about, Dave, about the travel. So we played our the first year that Vegas was in the league. We had a game in Dallas on a Monday night, and then our next game was on a Friday night in Vegas. Mr. Chipman wanted no part of our team to be playing and having 4 days off in Vegas, but
neither did I, as watching.
Yeah. The players fought for it. That was when they had their rookie parties. We flew from Dallas. We got back, and then, coaches, obviously we don't have rookie parties. We were grinding and working, and I was kind of known as the guy who never really went out. We just do a ton of work. And they asked me, they said, "Hey, we're going to go out for this dinner." I didn't want to go out. I was so tired. I just kind of told a white lie, and I said, "No, I got a ton of work to do. I got a lot of work to do." So they said, "All right, they're going to go out for dinner." As they're walking by my room, I'm like I'll sit in the bathtub for a long time, and those guys didn't really appreciate that very much. They were walking by, and they were like listening to my door because they heard the bath going, and I just told them that I was working and I couldn't go out for dinner. So the next morning we meet, and you guys know Paul and how he talks, and Kevin Weeks does the best Paul impression I've ever seen in my life. And then Paul just said, what happened last night? And I said, oh, I just did some work. He said, walked by your room and I heard the bathtub going. And I said, I was caught. I was like, oh my gosh. And then he just said to me, he goes, who takes a bath? And I said, well, I take a bath. And then he goes, well, big boy, who takes a bath in a hotel? And then I was like, oh my gosh. And then he just came back and he said, who takes a bath in a hotel in Vegas? So even now, still, when he's on the road, he'll just like take a picture of a bathtub and send it to me. Charlie Huddy and Jamie Compon and all the guys would just die laughing at me. So I think that's the one you're doing. I'm so happy they're doing great. They're doing so well right now. And Toronto too. Sheldon's got these guys humming like I watched one of their games and they're going. They're playing that Nashville game last night. I thought they were really tight.
Well, for the criticisms that I've given that team over the years, and again, it's not unjust, right? I mean, I've never been one of these morning guys or one of these, sports personalities that sits there and rips a team or say everyone sucks. It's not that. For me, it's always about X's and O's, just because of the way I grew up. It's always about fixing problems. It's like what you need to do to be successful. And I have, over the period of time, doubted whether what they had built overall is going to be successful. And the model I use, Todd, is I often look at, what the cars of the years are, or the most successful cars, like a vehicle, like when you build something, because to build a hockey team, it's like that. There's a lot of different parts, and sometimes the parts are different from each other. They don't look the same. And to me, to win in the NHL, it's like an SUV, because it's got to be fast enough, but it's got to be big enough. It's got to have a chassis. It's got to go through some rough stuff. It can't be just a little sports car, because a little sports car, when it comes to the wintertime, it's great when it whips in the summer, just doesn't work in the wintertime. So when I look at those teams that win championships, how are they built? And what I've said about the Leafs over the years is that they have like a Fiero, or they have a sports car where they like to put the top down. And at some point you're going to get into rougher stuff, and it just doesn't seem to work. So far, it's regular season and they look pretty good. I think the sports car is working, but my concern is always the same, that when it starts to get into what I call big boy hockey, that it's hard for them to change their stripes. I just, when I see grit and guys that are going to push you around a little bit, and the teams that have won, like Daryl Sutter's LA teams, certainly the Chicago era, regardless of other problems, obviously, that have come, but what they built on the ice were teams that could play different ways. They could play any style of hockey you want. They could roll four lines, but if they wanted to make it nasty, they just hit a switch and they can play nasty. Their top players are going to start playing with grit. My concern is always the same with the Leafs, is they have a sports car. They don't have an SUV. How do you become successful with this model? That's my question.
I love that analogy of the car. I'm going to steal that and use it as my own. I think, Mike, like when I look at the playoffs, so I watched 65 playoff games this year, and I clipped them all and I show them to our players. The only NHL clips I ever show our players are playoff clips, because that's the most important time. And how many of those games were 1-goal games? You look at Tampa, they beat the Islanders in game 7. It's a 1-0 game. Tampa, when they won the cup, it's a 1-0 game, and the goal was scored coincidentally by a UVM player, Ross Colton, the bottom 6 guy. Right? It wasn't Stamkos, it wasn't Point, it wasn't Hedman scoring. So I love that analogy. But to me, I look at, how did Tampa get there? So Tampa 3 years ago, that's the best hockey team I've ever seen in my life live. They drilled everybody. They get into the playoffs, they lose 4 straight to Columbus. So what changed for Tampa? I think Tampa figured out how hard it is to win. If winning was easy, everybody would do it. What are you prepared to sacrifice to win? And I think they figured it out. And you've mentioned Chicago. So Chicago wins a couple cups, and then they take a bunch of years off, then they win another one. Pittsburgh wins a couple in the early 2000s, then it takes them 10 years before they can win again. What's the difference? I think when Crosby and Malkin, now they're surrounded again with players, Hornquist, guys who understand how hard it is to win. That's where I think you're coming with Toronto. When they figure that out, they're obviously offensively a juggernaut, but most of the games in the playoffs are really tight. There's the margin for error is razor thin. That's when those teams, I think, reveal themselves. I think Tampa figured that out. You see how hard Kucherov plays. I have clips of Braden Point. I show our guys all the time. They're not scoring clips. They're just getting in front of somebody. It's having a stick down at the right time. It's basically wearing the equipment of your opponent because you're inside that player playing hard. That's when you mentioned grit. That's what I think. I think to win, you got to hack away at it all the time.
Yeah.
Hashtag gut hockey. Gut hockey.
Yeah,
Todd?
yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
Hey, one final question before we go. Todd, just to bring our listeners into some of our conversations that we have throughout the weeks, because you and I go back and forth on text quite a bit. So I'm coaching at Vic Village, and there's a number of my coaching staff that I'm with, great guys that are very familiar with Todd Woodcroft, because Todd, Mike, is very legendary in this Don Mills area that I live in. And one of the guys turns to me while we're tying our skates and he says, you know what? And I'm putting Todd on the spot right now, and I love it. Get him to do a Shawn Michaels impression, because Todd Woodcroft used to do this killer Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels impression. And you talked about Kevin Weeks doing Paul Maurice. Do you still know how to do the Shawn Michaels impression?
That's been a long time. I don't think I'm going to win doing that one. I remember the team that we would do that. That was literally my first coaching job. It was with the Don Mills Flyers. It was myself and Spence Curtin. And I remember trying to come in. I was 23, 24 years old. I didn't know much. So wrestling impressions back then were the best ones. I would be doing.
Well, they still are.
I would be doing a disservice if I did Shawn Michaels. I don't even think anybody. Most of the listeners probably don't even remember Shawn Michaels now.
Well, you know what? One day we'll work on it. I'll do the Macho Man. You can do Shawn Michaels, and we'll save that for another.
It was the Macho Man's birthday the other day. Like that.
Oh yeah, it was Todd Woodcroft. Yes, it was.
The people don't really know that the Toronto Ties and all those wrestlers, right? Like that was the Tunney family, a great hockey family. It said Zauner was a guy. Jerry Zauner was a doctor, and he took care of all those wrestlers, and that was the Tunney family. They handed over obviously to me. I don't think they monetized it. I wish they did, because it was a great family.
Yeah, it was. It's funny that name. I mean, that's kind of like royalty, literally, when you go back to it, and that was a hub. Fantastic stuff and fantastic days.
My friends and I used to like the guys who never won. Like that was always our joke. Like AJ Petrucci's and Spidey Webb and all those guys. Those were our favorite guys who never won a match ever. Those were our heroes.
Todd, always great catching up with you. We wish you all the success, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. Now, over the holidays, what happens for you? Do you stay down there? What happens for you and your family?
I will be recruiting a bit. I'd like to get together with Iron Mike Sharp, Canada's greatest athlete, if I could ever find him. He's Canada's greatest athlete. We'll bring him in there. Maybe we'll bring Iron Mike Sharp on staff. Yeah, exactly. So I've laughed here today. Yeah, no, it's going to be, we work all the way through. The good thing is we have two coaches will be at the World Juniors, which allows Patrick Sharp. Patrick Sharp is on our staff, and he can come and be on the bench with us and all these cool things. So we got a lot of stuff planned for these young players in our team to get better and have a good time too.
Oh, that's fantastic stuff. You take care, my friend. Great to see you, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
All right, guys. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks, pal.
See you guys.
Is Todd Woodcroft, coach of the Vermont Catamounts, joins you this morning. Always a great time. He's just one of the all-time good guys. He really is.